One minute you're on top of the world, next minute you're told that your child has cancer. She would wake up screaming and then she would vomit. Also, when she was walking, she would lose her balance. So I go down to the hotel lobby, I get on the computer and I start researching. And the first thing that pops up is brain tumor.
You're not just dealing with the battle of the cancer, but you're dealing with the day-to-day battle of just life.
You can't even hold your child. It's heartbreaking.
Today, we have Chief Marc Vermont. All right. Hey.
Marc is an assistant fire chief for Oakland Park Fire Rescue, a father, and a man who turned loss into hope. Through Kendra's Kisses Foundation, he makes sure no family fights childhood cancer alone.
Emotionally, you and your wife, what are you guys going through?
Initially, it's almost going through the steps of a grieving process. I learned this. You can't control what's happening to you, but you can control how you react to it. My wife and I came up with this idea. Let's start a charity. Let's name it after Kendra and go to the children's hospitals in South Florida, and let's find out if there's a mechanism for us to go ahead and donate money to the families. Then we had to come up with how are we going to raise money, and we meet this couple. The guy's name is Jack Bevilacqua, and after he shared his story, I shared my story about Kendra and our foundation. He goes, we could do a Crack Up Cancer event in South Florida, give all the proceeds to Kendra's Kisses.
Which we got one coming up.
March 21st, it's at the Savour Theater, downtown Fort Lauderdale. It's called Crack Up Cancer. 100% of the proceeds go to Kendra's Kisses. We have 4 headliner comics.
Get your tickets, man.
Get your tickets now.
Welcome to another episode of A Healthy Point of View podcast. I'm your host, Sam Tejada, and as usual, we're bringing experts from all over the world to talk about health, wellness, beauty, and mindset. Today's guest, he's local. You know, you guys see this fire department gear sitting right next to me. The 12 years that I did it, that I was out on the road, there's guys out there that have done it for a hell of a lot longer than I have. And today we got one of those. Today's guest, we're going to be talking about certain things, something that is going to touch your heart. We're going to talk about Kendra's Kisses. It's a nonprofit organization that was put together from an experience that he had to go through. This experience will make you realize that life can change at a blink of an eye. Even when you have everything going for you, you have investments that you're working on your education, you're doing all kinds of things to just better your life and better the life for your family. And boom, it can just change at a blink of an eye. Today, we have Chief Marc Vermont. All right. All right. Chief.
I like it. That was a heck of an intro. Thank you very much.
That's how we do it, man. Next time we'll have like a big fire siren.
Yeah, I'm ready. I was looking for the slide pole when I came in. I didn't see one. You got to.
Oh, that's in the back, man. That's the after hours pole. You know.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a honor to be on your show.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, welcome to begin with, and first I want to start off before we get into everything we're going to talk about. I want people to get to know you as a person, and what got you to where you're at today. So I want to go way back though. I want people to really get to know who you are. I want to go back to like when you were 5 years old. Like, what was your upbringing? What led you to actually become a firefighter-paramedic? You know, you obviously retired from one department. Now you're working as a chief in another department, Oakland Park Fire Rescue.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go way back. Who is Marc Vermont?
So 5 years old. It's funny. I can remember when I was 5 years old and my 5th birthday party, and they put the cake in front of me and they say, "Hey, close your eyes, make a wish, and blow out the candles." And my wish was I wanted to be surrounded by women, right? And I wasn't specific, so that part came true. So I had 2 sisters, female dog. I get married. I have 3 girls. The dog is another female. So I've been surrounded by women. So my wish when I was 5 years old came true. I was certainly surrounded by women, you know. But yeah, I was born in New York. Ended up moving down here when I was about 4.5 years old. Grew up in Miramar, and it was a great upbringing. It was a great childhood, you know, but just like anybody else's childhood in the mid to late 70s. You know, you're playing outside, you're running around, you're drinking from the fire hose, the hose on the side of the house and stuff like that. And yeah, it was great. And then I ended up I went to Miramar High School, and when I was in 10th grade, I went out with a friend of mine, a little what do you call it, the arcade,
Okay.
and we stopped to get gas right by the arcade. It was a place called Mixed Sugars. I don't know if you remember. It was on 595, uh, and it was actually when they were building I-595. And while I'm sitting on the car waiting for the gas to be pumped, I hear a crash, and right in front of me, a guy got run over by a car,
Oh wow.
pedestrian hit by a vehicle. And now I'm 16 years old. I don't know anything what to do, and I run over there, and the guy's like barely breathing. There was a piece of glass on the ground, and I picked up the piece of glass and I held it in front of his mouth because that's what I seen in the movies, to see if he was breathing.
Right.
And the guy was breathing, so I just kind of sat there and I said, "Hey, man, help is coming." I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know how to take a pulse, nothing. And so at that moment is when I was like, "Man, I got to learn what to do if this ever happened again to me." And that's when I kind of set my sights on medicine and getting into the field. And it wasn't paramedic right away. It was I actually started right after high school. Well, I joined HOSA, right, which is a health occupation class in high school.
Okay.
And so I went through that. You start learning about some medicine, and then I decided I was going to take some pre-med classes right after high school. So I started doing that, taking my chemistries, biologies, and all that stuff. And I needed a job, so I called up an ambulance company, and I got hired with an ambulance company back then. It was actually Randall Eastern down in Miami.
Mm.
And so during that, I decided to take an undergraduate, and I went to EMT in order to work for the ambulance company. Well, while I was doing the ride times that you have to do, the field clinicals, I did them with Hallandale, and
Okay.
the captain that was there, his name was Benny Sorgi, and he goes, "Hey, man, you're a big kid, you're 6'4", 220 pounds at the time." And he goes, "What do you want to be a doctor for? You're gonna work until you're 70, and you're gonna be paying your bills." He goes, "Why don't you become a firefighter, and you'll be retired by the time you're 50?" And I go, "Well, that sounds good." So I pretty much changed majors, and that's when I decided to go into paramedics. And then they sent me to the fire academy, and they hired me after I was done with the fire academy, and that's when I started in 1993.
Wow. Amazing, man.
Yeah,
So you were in Miramar in the 70s.
yeah,
So that was significantly different than what it
yeah,
is today.
yeah. It was a lot differently.
I mean, there was like a lot of farmland out that way, right?
Yeah, everything, basically west of Douglas Road was all just cows and horses and acreage, and stuff like that. And then, I-75 wasn't built yet.
That's crazy.
And
Wow.
we used to go out there. We used to go in the fields and collect bottles and go to the Circle K, and actually it was called Little General at the time. And we would take a shopping cart full of glass bottles and get like $10,
Wow.
for turning in the bottles. And yeah, it was a lot different childhood, and segregation was over by then, but you still didn't have a lot of minorities, and some of the minorities from West Park and Pembroke Park were bussed in, and there weren't a lot of Latins either, because they just weren't in the area. They were all in Miami.
Right, right.
And then little by little, they started bettering themselves and moving to, nicer neighborhoods. And Miramar was one of those neighborhoods. So the culture was just starting to change back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
And they would smash through some stereotypes also. I had plenty of guys I was friends with that would go surfing, and we would take trips up to Port St. Lucie and go surfing on the inlets.
Wow. There was definitely nothing up that way.
No, there was definitely nothing up there. And but yeah, and we never saw color or ethnicity or anything like that. And me myself, my mother's from Argentina, my
Okay.
father's from Belgium, and I'm also Jewish. But
Oh
none
wow.
of that mattered when
Right.
you're growing up. You were either cool or you weren't cool.
Right.
That was it. It didn't matter, what the color of your skin or your heritage or background. Nobody picked on anybody for any
Yeah.
of that stuff. If you were not a nice person, then you were probably getting in a fight in a schoolyard.
Yeah, yeah.
But it wasn't because of any of that. And it was really a close-knit group. And my graduation class in Miramar was probably around 300 people.
Oh,
Which is
that was pretty small.
pretty small, right?
Yeah.
At the time, and maybe a little bit more, maybe 400. I don't know exactly, but I still talk to a large group of
A
them.
lot of
You
them,
know, I
huh?
still stay in touch with them.
So let me ask you this, man. That Miami was built after that.
Hmm.
So you
Right.
were around during like the cocaine cowboy
Oh
days,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I
So you
so
must have seen a lot of craziness happen here in South Florida.
so one of the things that stands out is growing up in Miramar. This Cuban family moves in right across the street from us, and they had a big boat out front, and I was probably, I don't know, 8, 10 years old, and the guy goes, "Hey, let me take you and your dad out on the boat." We would go out on the boat. You know, it was like a 50-foot boat. We go out, we're cruising around, and all of a sudden one day, boom, they're gone. No boat, no house. They're gone. The family's gone. Never heard from them again.
Really?
Come to find out is they were moving some drugs and they got busted
On that boat.
on that
Oh
boat.
man.
Yeah, so yeah, we saw a couple square grouper wash up and stuff like that, you
Yeah,
know. So
that's crazy.
it was yeah, it was quite an experience back then.
Yeah, man.
The Miami Vice days, you know.
It's you watch all those documentaries and stuff, and it's just like, man, the people that lived here back then. It's
Yeah.
just like you had to you had to know someone, So
Yeah, absolutely.
even the regular person was just like potentially taking little opportunities, getting involved.
Yeah.
The whole Miami people got to understand Miami was built on all of that.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. And that was one of the things that they did is, you know, how am I going to turn this illegal drug money into something productive? So there were a lot of construction companies that popped up,
yeah,
and they really developed Brickell, and,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen Cocaine Cowboys.
Oh
They
yeah,
talked
hundred
about it
percent.
there, and all these high rises, and just really put Miami on the map for, out of something negative, they turned it into a
Into something
positive. You know, they
positive.
they built
That's
up the
true.
city.
Now, when you started working for the fire department, what were those days kind of done? What were the years of that?
So I started in '93 with Hallandale Beach, and they were just kind of winding down. I mean, we still saw,
Were you seeing a lot of crime when you're at the fire
yeah, we
department?
saw we saw crime. You know, we in the certain section in Hallandale, the northwest area. There's a lot of, we used to call it the Knife and Gun Club, and
Mm,
there was a lot of drug dealings going on there, and drug overdoses, a lot of
yeah.
shootings, stabbings, a lot of stuff like that, and probably until the late '90s, that was pretty, almost every shift you're getting a shooting, a stabbing, and an
Wow.
overdose. You know, it was pretty crazy. And yeah, so and then the shift in the 2000s, um, a lot of Russian and European started coming in, and speculative, right? I don't know what they were doing, but they were driving some Lamborghinis and some Porsches, and
A lot of
some
the Italian cars,
a
right?
lot of high end stuff. And you see 20-year-old kids driving Lamborghinis. I'm like,
Yeah.
how did you get that?
And Bitcoin didn't exist back
No, no, there was no
then.
Bitcoin, and I mean, I'm sure the Dow Jones was probably around 3,000, 4,000 points, and I was like, so where are you making your money? But in any case, yeah, it kind of did a shift, and then by the mid 2000s, it started changing, and really turning into development and investors and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So all right, man. So we got to know you a little bit, and
Hmm.
when you started at the fire department and everything, and today's podcast is really about what you went through. Um, you were already at the fire department.
Hmm.
Um, got married, started a family, and you went through a certain event where your daughter got diagnosed with a brain tumor,
Yeah.
right? Um, I want to go back to the time, and I want you to be as detailed as possible so people can actually understand how life can actually change at a blink of an eye. At the point in time that you actually found out about her being diagnosed
Right.
with this brain tumor.
Yeah. So my daughter Kendra was born in 2003. Our firstborn daughter. She was born March 21st, 2003, and everything was normal, right? You got a healthy, beautiful, blonde hair, blue eyed girl. It's our first kid, so we're taking hundreds of pictures every day, and she was the center of our universe. And 2.5 years later, in September of 2005, we, my wife and I decided to go on an Alaskan cruise. And my mother-in-law, Tricia, she stayed with Kendra and she watched her. And so we fly out to Seattle, we get on the cruise. My wife was also 3 months pregnant, I believe, at the time with our
Okay.
second daughter, right? So, we're on top of the world. I was taking some classes for my bachelor degree. I had just taken a battalion chief promotional exam at work, so I was already an officer. I was looking at getting promoted. We had just invested in some property on the West Coast, had that going on. Just found out we're having another baby. I'm like, yeah, life is going
You're
good,
living the
right?
dream.
Living the dream. Everything is jamming. And so I'm like, hey, let's go have a little vacation. We always wanted to go to Alaska, do an Alaskan cruise, see the whales and all kinds of stuff. So we're on the cruise. We come back from the cruise. And back then, you didn't have internet packages on the cruise, right?
Right,
So
right.
when you were on the boat, you were really disconnected.
Right.
So we get back, and I called to check in with my mother-in-law. Hey, how things going? And she goes, well, everything's good. And I could hear it in her voice right away. Something was wrong. And she tells me that Kendra, every morning, she would wake up screaming, and then she would vomit. And then also when she was walking, she would lose her balance. So now she's 2.5, been walking for a while now, right?
Right.
And she would walk and she'd go, whoa, and she would catch herself. And then sometimes she would even fall down. So she takes her to the doctor, just a general physician. And they go, well, maybe she has vertigo. And I said, that just doesn't sound right. So what do? I go down to the hotel lobby. I get on the computer and I start researching, put in the signs and symptoms. And the first thing that pops up is brain tumor.
Mm.
So again, I don't know anything. I certainly don't tell my wife that, right?
Right,
I
right.
didn't say anything. So when we get home, first thing I did was I took my daughter to Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. We go in, same thing. Every morning, she would wake up screaming, she would throw up, and then she would feel a little bit better, but she was still unsteady, wobbly on her feet.
And before the cruise, this was never happening.
Nothing,
Wow.
didn't suspect anything. Perfectly healthy, running, playing, everything.
Right.
So we take her to Joe DiMaggio. First thing that they do is they go, okay, we're going to do a CT scan. And they do the CT scan. They come in the room and they say to my wife and myself, they said, can we talk to you outside? And they're bringing us in a little room. And right away, I'm like, not good, not good. If nothing's wrong, they're telling you right in front,
Right.
hey, nothing's wrong. So they tell us a tumor showed up on the CT scan. Got a tumor on her brain. We don't know if it's cancerous or not, but we have to do surgery tomorrow morning. And of course, you're hit with a sledgehammer, right?
Right.
1 minute you're on top of the world, next minute you're told that your child has cancer, right? It's cancer. Could be benign, could be malignant. You don't know.
Right.
And so there's really no choice at that point. There's no time to get a second opinion. There's no time to, send her to another hospital or anything like that. And you just go with it. And I remember just because in our profession, I pulled the surgeon aside and I kind of gave him a very pointed question. I said, she's going to live through this surgery or not? And he goes, yes, she is in good hands. And he put me at ease a little bit, at least at that moment,
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
that I could trust him.
Right.
I mean, because you're taking a 2.5-year-old girl and you're cutting into her head,
Right.
right? A lot of delicate parts in there. So, I'm thinking she could come out of this paralyzed, she could die on a table, all these things. So they did the surgery next morning and they confirmed that it was a malignant brain tumor called a medulloblastoma. And then we had to start preparing for what came next.
How common is that type of brain tumor?
So it's as far as childhood cancers, it is a common tumor,
It is. Okay.
right? And before we started the podcast, we had talked. You had told me about genes that you have in your body
Right.
that suppress tumors. So one of the things I did was I asked, once we got to St. Jude, I asked the doctor, I said, was this, did my wife do something while, did she have a glass of wine without knowing? What caused this? How do kids get cancer? And he goes, it could be a multitude of things, but it's nothing you guys did. There is nothing your wife did. There's nothing you did. There's nothing you fed her. Nothing you did came out of that. And childhood cancer is different than, let's say, adult cancers. You get lung cancer from smoking cigarettes, right? Or you get various causational cancers from different things you do in your life.
Right.
With kids, it's actually a genetic malformation that gene turns off, and the cancer that is in everybody's body that is normally suppressed just activates.
It's activated.
And it's not hereditary. It doesn't mean that anybody else in your family is going to get it. It doesn't mean that it came from you. It's just a completely random thing when the child is developed that occurs. So there was nothing we could have done to prevent it, or so they really put our mind at ease with that.
So at this point in time, when she's diagnosed with the cancer, is undergoing the surgery. I mean, emotionally, you and your wife, what are you guys going through? Because there's a lot of the people go into a sense of depression, right? There's all the thoughts are going through your head. Families reaching out, some families not reaching out because they don't know how to handle it. So, like, what was that feeling for you and your wife at that point in time?
So it's a tidal wave of feeling. Initially, it's almost like going through the steps of a grieving process, right?
Right.
Initially, you're angry, right? And then you kind of you go through all these different things, some guilt, right? You think it's something you did. And then you start getting into, okay, well, we could go one of two routes. We could either get depressed, and get suicidal, but what's that going to do, right? That does nothing. That does no good. So I said, okay, we're gonna do positive. We're gonna stay positive, and we're gonna do everything we can to overcome this, right? And you can't just rely on the medical team. You really have to do your own research, and you have to learn everything you can about that. Do a lot of reading, do a lot of research, and you put those pieces together with your medical team, and you question them every step of the way. And they probably hated me for it, right? Because these guys went to med school. They did it. They'd probably seen 1,000 patients. But I'm still going to question you every step of the way to make sure that you're doing the best for my child. And I'm sure some of the doctors took that as like, hey, I'm being difficult, but it's not that, because you want the best for your child, you want the best for your family. So I would question them every step of the way. And
And especially with your knowledge and skill set of working in the fire department for so
Right.
many years, seeing stuff,
right,
you're not the easiest guy to be on the other side for these doctors.
right, and a little bit of knowledge that we have as a paramedic, we have a little bit of knowledge across the board,
Right.
right? Every little thing, we kind of put it all together, and not to diminish us being paramedics, but we're not doctors, right? And but it gives us a little bit of knowledge, and we have that mind frame to do the research and to learn and to fully understand it. And it's stuff that you never want to learn, right? Because in paramedicine or first responders, you're really not dealing with cancer a lot.
Right.
You may deal with some of the signs and symptoms of cancer, right? But we're not diagnosing cancer. We're not treating cancer. We're
Right.
not doing any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a lot to learn. And my wife and I think we went home that night, and we looked at each other, and we said, it's you and I against the world now, right? And we're going to make whatever decision comes our way with each other, and we're going to agree behind closed doors what's best for our child. Yeah. And because then you start getting a lot of outside influence, right? And you have to filter out everything and stay on track. And we decided to approach this together, take the positive road, and that's why we're coming up on our 29th anniversary being married,
Wow.
because
Amazing.
we decided to do that, and stay together.
You know, you brought up that it was very similar to the grieving process.
Yeah.
And for the listeners and viewers who don't really understand that, that's when someone passes away.
Hmm.
You go through this grieving process, which includes, let me see if I remember, denial, anger, you start bargaining. Then you go through, so denial, anger, bargaining, and then you go through depression, and then there's the acceptance.
Acceptance, right?
Man, I remember that from paramedic
That was
school.
good.
That's
That was
actually
good.
crazy that
I
remember
couldn't have
that.
rattled that off either. There you go.
But you go through all of these stages, and in all reality, through your situation, you went through a lot of these stages.
Yeah.
Right. What was it? You guys have a spiritual belief, you and your wife?
So I'm Jewish. My wife is, I think, Protestant. But before we even had kids and we got married, I got my parents saying, "Oh, you got to have a Jewish wedding," and then you got her parents saying, "Oh, we got to do these, Christian things," and we talked and we had some heart to hearts, before we even got married, and said, "You know what? We don't necessarily need a religion to tell us to be good people, you know."
Right.
So we decided to have values, and a lot of the values align with religions, right? But we're going to do the right thing. We're going to raise our kids, and we're going to let our kids choose if they want to follow a religion or not. So we believe in God. I just don't believe in the religious confinement of that,
Right.
right? And part of that, I could go into a whole nother podcast with my
Yeah.
history. My father was in a concentration camp
Oh wow.
during World War II, and he was in a concentration camp because of his beliefs, because he was born Jewish and he followed that religion. So I don't have to rehash that. Everybody knows the history of that. But I was raised Jewish, and I was bar mitzvahed. But I made the conscious decision before I even met my wife that I don't want to be persecuted for something I believe in, but I don't want to hide it either, right? I just chose to be spiritual and believe in a higher power, and just be a good person, just
And that's important, believing in some higher power, right? And there's a lot of studies that have proved that people do a lot better as long as you believe in a higher power.
Mhm.
Yeah. So my question with that is, throughout this process of your daughter going through the surgery and going through these treatments and stuff, which we're going to get into in a minute, did you guys tap in to the higher power? Was that part of the process, or was it more of you guys kind of questioning, like, well, if there's a higher power?
Oh, I certainly questioned it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Being in the field, I've run calls and I've delivered babies from women that were crack addicts and, you know, all kinds of drugs, and the baby comes out and they're perfectly healthy. And you question, absolutely, what is the meaning of all this? Why is my beautiful daughter going through this? Why does she have
Right.
cancer? So yeah, you get, that's part of the anger.
Right.
You get angry at God, let me tell you that. And then I said, okay, I wasn't a big prayer person, but every night before I went to bed, I said a prayer. I said, look, I don't care what happens to me. I don't care what happens, to anybody else. Just save this little girl's life. And I would say a prayer every night. And I mean, ultimately it didn't work, but you also have to believe that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
One of the things that brought me here to sit in front of you and tell everybody my story is that Kendra brought some awareness, and we developed this foundation to bring some awareness to childhood cancer and to help people that are going through it that could be completely lost after a diagnosis of that.
And you saw that, fortunately for you working in the fire department, we have a strong brotherhood,
Hmm.
right? And you were able to get certain support from the brotherhood
Yeah.
that most people don't have access to that. And I want to talk about that. First, get into like some of the things that you had to experience with your wife because we're currently still at St. Jude's, right?
Right.
And no, sorry, it's Joe DiMaggio.
We were at Joe
Joe
DiMaggio
DiMaggio's.
initially, yeah.
And then Joe DiMaggio wasn't able to really fully do the treatment
Right,
on your daughter.
right.
So what happens from there?
So she has the surgery, they remove the tumor, and before they can start any chemotherapy, they have to test to see if the spinal fluid is clear of cancer cells, right? So
They do that with like what a spinal tap or
they do a spinal tap,
okay.
and they pull some cerebral spinal fluid out, send it to the lab, and it's about a week after the surgery, right? So they pull that, and they come back and they say there's some cancer cells in the spinal fluid that we found. So it's not just a tumor now. The tumor, it was encapsulated, but she had complications of that cancer in her spinal fluid. So essentially, they pulled us aside. They said, "Look, we do conventional. We don't do any research here, um, and the conventional therapy is really not going to be the best for her."
Mm.
Again, I hit the research, right? I start searching. Okay, what are my options here? So there's actually a website called clinicaltrials.org, and I stumbled upon it, and I start looking through the clinical trials. And the clinical trials for medulloblastoma that had spread to the spinal fluid, there were 3 places in the world treating that, and it was a trial basis. One was in Munich, Germany, one was in Australia, and the other one was at St. Jude in Memphis, Tennessee. So I find out that um, they were opening up, all of those trials have like windows where they open up and they accept patients in there.
Right.
So I called them up right away. I talked to the doctors at Joe DiMaggio. They said, "Yeah, go for it. We'll write, send whatever we need to." They're 100% supportive. So I call them and I said, "Look, we have another complication though. My wife is pregnant also, so wherever we go, I need to make sure that she has prenatal care and everything." So I talk to the social workers at St. Jude. They get us set up. Within a week, I'm driving my wife's car to Memphis, and then they flew out my wife and Kendra out to Memphis, Tennessee. So they accepted us into the protocol. As soon as we get to St. Jude, they have to redo the scans to find out what's going on from their end. So they send us to Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, which is not part of St. Jude, but it's the Children's Hospital in Memphis.
Okay.
And we go there, they do a CT scan, and they tell us the tumor regrew.
Mm.
Said it's been 10 days. They said, "Yeah, this is an aggressive tumor." So they had to do a second brain surgery
Wow.
on Kendra once we got to Memphis before they could start. Now we're also in a crunch for time because these clinical trials close at a certain date. Once they close, you can't be admitted into it. So she was able to get admitted into the trial. They had the second surgery, and they started her on the therapy at St. Jude.
So now this therapy gets started at St. Jude. Now you're in a whole other state.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's your wife is pregnant
yeah,
as well, which one of the things you mentioned is when a patient is undergoing these type of treatments, a pregnant woman can't get exposed to these things, right?
right. Yeah, you can't. You want to hold your child when they're sticking a needle in their head. They got a port, for the chemotherapy and all that stuff. Well, that chemotherapy, as you're administering it, will come out in, through sweat or whatever.
Right.
Or if they vomit on you, it has chemotherapy. And if you're pregnant, that can be absorbed into your body and that'll pass the placental barrier and affect the unborn child. So you can't expose them to that. So there was a lot of times when Kendra was getting therapy, my wife Christy couldn't even hold her, um, because I don't know how many people watching this right now know, but if you're going through chemotherapy, you are throwing up a lot.
Yeah.
We had to get rid of the couch in our house because there was so much vomit on it. So that's a real problem when they're actively getting the chemo. You can't even hold your child. So it's heartbreaking.
Now, throughout this whole process, what people got to realize is that number one, life is still happening,
Yeah.
right? You still got a mortgage, you still got car payments,
Hmm.
there's other responsibilities
Right.
that you have to take care of. What were some of those things that um, started affecting you in certain ways? Because obviously you guys are going up there, so you're probably not working your other job that was probably supplementing your income from the
Yep.
fire department.
Absolutely.
You can barely even work at the fire department.
Right.
Your wife is not working because she's with your daughter.
Right.
So, the like that's a whole another level of stress on its own.
Yeah, so a lot of things we saw when we were at St. Jude was there was a whole lot of single mothers, and when you start talking to them, um, quite a few of them had their husbands or boyfriends or whatever they were at the time just bail on them. Hey,
Really?
this is your kid. I want nothing to do with it, and they move
Oh
on.
man,
Right.
that's
So
crazy.
so that's even more devastating for them. Some of the things we went through, you're right. At the time, I was teaching. At Broward College. I was teaching paramedic school. I was a lead instructor for that. I did hospital clinicals. I taught ACLS. I taught at Miami Children's. I did teaching all over. So every day I was off shift at the fire department, I was teaching somewhere. And yeah, that was supplemental income. And that's all part time stuff, right? So if you're not there, you're not getting paid.
Right.
So that was out the window. At the fire department, I'm looking at a promotion, right? I was hoping to get it promoted to battalion chief. And now I'm not even there. I got guys working for me so I could keep my job and keep getting a paycheck. Now the one thing that the fire department did do for me is they approved all of those shift exchanges that people wanted to do without a payback.
Wow,
So
that's huge.
they had the union got a list of people, and everybody signed up to take my shifts on a rotating basis so that I could be in Memphis with
And how long they do that for?
11 months.
Wow,
11 months. Yep.
that's that brotherhood, man.
Yeah,
That's
it's unbelievable. And then so on top of that, it was just such a perfect storm of so many different things. In October 2005 is when Hurricane Wilma came through.
mm,
And if you were here during Hurricane Wilma, it was pretty devastating, where people were out of electricity for 20 days,
yeah,
up
I
to
remember
3
that.
weeks. And so we're in the hospital in St. Jude, and I'm talking to my neighbor on the phone. He goes, "Oh, your fence just blew away. Oh, there goes part of your roof." So
Wow,
he's telling me all these things that my house is getting battered. And then again, going back to the brotherhood of the fire department, I had all the firefighters go to my house. They fixed my fence. They fixed my roof. They boarded up my house before the storm came, and all this stuff. And they all did that, and they're just doing whatever they can, to help alleviate some of that pain. Now, like I said, most people that are at St. Jude dealing with that, they don't have that network of people to come through and help take care of those things.
right, right, right. Man, it's you're not just dealing with the battle of the cancer, but you're dealing with the day to day battle of just life
Yeah.
in general. So, you know, one of the things that you experience is all of these different action of kindness that occurred for you,
Hmm.
right? Which I would say, based off of hearing the story prior to the podcast and understanding it, is one of the reasons why the foundation was created, right? Um, Tell us about the story of when you were driving up there in the car,
Yeah.
you know, because that's another act of kindness, brotherhood.
Absolutely. So my friend Sharif and I took my wife's car, and we knew it was going to be a long-term process, right? We knew we weren't going to St. Jude for 2 weeks. We knew it was going to be a long haul, and at the time we had no idea. And we figured out if they're going to fly my wife and Kendra out to St. Jude, she needed to have a car. So my buddy and I got in a car and we drove it up on the weekend, and we get somewhere in Georgia or Alabama. I don't remember exactly where, but the AC cut out, and this is in September, so it was still pretty hot out.
Yeah.
So we go the rest of the way. We roll into Memphis, um, on the afternoon on a Sunday, and I go I go to I don't know where to go to get my car fixed, right? So you got an AC that goes out, and how do you who do you know who to trust? Get a reputable mechanic to fix
Right.
it. So I said, well, let me stop by a fire station. And I go to the fire station, and the guy there was I think his last name or his first name was Curtis, and he was a captain with Memphis Fire. And I'm talking to him a little bit, and I tell him why we're there, right? I told him I'm a firefighter back in South Florida, and I said I'm looking for a good mechanic so I can get my AC fixed. And he goes here, go to this address. I remember it was on Adams Street, and he goes, go there tomorrow morning, and they'll take care of you. I said okay. So I'm thinking he's sending me to a buddy of his that's a mechanic, right? I drive down Adams Street and I go down and I see a bunch of fire trucks and ambulances in the parking lot. I pass it and I go back the other way and I'm looking and I finally pull in. I go, hey, I'm looking for this number on Adams Street. And the guy goes, yeah, that's right here. I go, is this the motor pool for Memphis Fire? He goes, yeah. The guy goes, who sent you here? I said, Curtis did. And he goes, oh, yeah, we'll take care of you, man. So they gave me their account number for the auto parts store. They told me they diagnosed the car. I go to the auto parts store. I pick up the parts for a severely discounted amount. I go back. The battalion chief, they have like a rank structure in their motor pool. The battalion chief gives me a ride back to the apartment that we were staying at in St. Jude. And they fix the car. The next day, they call me up. The battalion chief comes out to pick me up, brings me back. This is before Uber.
Right.
So he brings me back and they fixed the car for free. Didn't charge me a penny. And they were like, you need anything, you let us know, we'll help you out. And that's really how the entire community in Memphis is. They know that St. Jude is there, and they know that they have hundreds, if not thousands of patients there. And you don't, if you have a bracelet, if you have a child with a bracelet from the hospital, the hospital bracelet,
Right.
you don't pay to go to the zoo, the Memphis Zoo. You don't pay to go to Graceland. You don't pay to go to Sun Studios, to the Gibson Guitar Factory, all these things, because they know you're dealing with the worst thing that can ever be dealt to you in your life, childhood cancer. And to try to give you and the child a little bit of normalcy, they want you to, when you're not in the hospital, to experience life. These kids, it's up to 18 years old. And especially the younger ones, that becomes their norm. It's normal for them to go to the Memphis Zoo, and then the next day they're getting needles stuck in them and they're getting chemotherapy and all this stuff. So, and it just becomes their reality. To us, it's heartbreaking, but to them, they're just being kids.
Yeah.
It's just different life for them.
And that's the whole community there. We're not just talking about the St. Jude's Hospital.
Right.
You're talking about outside of the hospital.
Yeah.
You go to a restaurant and people,
Yeah.
and I remember you telling me that you go to a restaurant and it's like your bill is covered, just
Yeah.
because people know.
We went to it was like a TGI Fridays, and, we're sitting at the table and, you start getting into normalcy also, and you don't even think about it that your child is sitting there and she has no hair, right? And then you go to get your bill after you finish eating, and they go, hey, your bill's been covered. And the waitress, they just say, yeah, this happens all the time. They don't want any recognition. They don't want you to know who it is. We took care of your bill.
Wow.
So it's really amazing. So, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to take some of that and pay it forward, so to speak. And that was one of the things that led us to creating that foundation also.
Wow. Yeah. So let's talk about that. And Kendra, how long did she last going through the treatments? What, 11 months you said?
So 11 months in St. Jude, and then I think she got released. They call it end of treatment, right? So the end of treatment was in December of I got to get my timing right here. December of 2006. Is that right? No, December 2005. No, I don't know. The timeline's messed up for me. I apologize. It was 11 months of treatment. And then she ended up passing away on May 3rd, 2007. So yeah, maybe it was December. It was December 2006. So it was 11 months, and then maybe another 5 months after that is when she ended up passing away, which happened to be 2 days after my now oldest daughter, Layla, who was born in Memphis. That's who my wife was pregnant with at the time. So Layla was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was 2 days after her first birthday is when Kendra passed away.
So you know, obviously throughout this journey, you saw a lot of other mothers and families
Yeah,
go through certain things that they didn't have the brotherhood at the fire department to give
right,
them support.
right,
Heck, they didn't even have the father
right.
around, you
Yeah.
know, to be able to support. So at what point in time did you decide, you and your wife, where you guys said, you know what, let's continue Kendra's, you know, impact that she had on you
Right.
guys and be able to put this foundation together?
So I heard of other foundations down here that were already established, and most of the foundations that you hear about, they raise, uh, huge amounts of money, and they donate it to research, and they donate it to the hospitals, and all of that is needed. I don't know what the number is now for St. Jude, but back then they needed to raise $1 million a day to operate the hospital.
Wow.
$1 million a day. That's astronomical, right?
Yeah.
So, you have these huge corporations, these big fundraising entities, and I said, well, let's. I can't do that, but let me start somewhere small. And one of the things, people that didn't know what to do, they wanted to help in some way, they would donate money to us, right?
Right.
So we got money donations and all this stuff. And what we did was, I just opened up an account and I put all the donations into that account. And then when Kendra finally passed away, we used some of that money for funeral expenses, for various things that came about with that. And because who takes out life insurance for a child? Most people don't do that, right? Because it's the last thing you're expecting. So we had some expenses with that. The good thing is, St. Jude, you never get a bill from them.
Mm.
They bill the insurance, and if the insurance, whatever the insurance doesn't pay, they pay. That's why it takes $1 million a day
Wow.
to run that hospital. So you don't pay for a test, you don't pay for chemo, you don't pay for anything, right? So it's really it's an amazing organization. So after everything was kind of passed over, we still had some money left in an account. And how do you figure out, oh, Sam gave me $100, here's $100 back? There's no way to do that. There's no way to track it. So I said, well, let me kind of pay it forward, and that's a term. I didn't even know that was a term until the movie came out. But
All right.
I said, well, let me do some good back, and so my wife and I came up with this idea. Let's start a charity. Let's name it after Kendra, and let's go to the hospitals in South Florida, the children hospitals, and let's find out if there's a mechanism for us to get in touch with them, and to go ahead and donate money to the families, straight to the families. Because there wasn't a whole lot of that. There's not a whole lot of foundations that just give you money. There's
Right.
Make-A-Wish, there's all these other great charities, but there weren't a whole lot that you can say, hey, I can't make my mortgage payment, I need some money. So that's where we started going. And I met with a doctor at Joe DiMaggio, and I don't remember the doctor's name, but we met briefly, and he kind of gave me some pointers. He said, look, believe it or not, there could be some fraud, right? People could take advantage of you, so you need to have some kind of vetting system. And he suggested that we go through the social workers, so you can verify that they are who they say they are, that they actually have a child going through treatments and
Right.
stuff like that. So we created a survey that we have on our website that you can go on, and if you're going through this, you can fill out that survey, and that's how we get it. And we created a board. And the funny thing is, um, we have what's called details at work, right? So
Right.
details are something that's outside of your normal day to day, right? And we had a dog track, Hollywood dog track. I think it's now called Mardi Gras Casino, but we had a standing detail there every night. Somebody had to be there from like 4 p.m. until 2 a.m., 2 or 3 a.m. Wasn't too busy. We had a nice little room. I ran my computer, and that's where I developed all of the paperwork and the applications and the 501(c)(3) application
Wow.
and all the nonprofit stuff. And I would sit there and in my quiet little office, in the medical room at the dog track. And that's where I got a lot of the stuff done to develop the foundation. And once we got to that point, uh, then we had to come up with how are we going to raise money? That obviously the couple $1,000s that we had left over is not going to be substantial enough to run a foundation.
Right.
So then we had to come up with fundraising ideas. And
So what did those look like back then?
so back then, while it was a St. Jude, one of their big events, fundraising events, are 5Ks, half marathons, and marathons. And I'm sure you can all see me. I'm not built like a runner, but I decided to go out and say, hey, let me do a 5K. And I did a couple 5Ks, and they were fun. And just like anything else, we have a certain personality to get into the fire service, and we want to be better at everything we do.
Right,
Right.
right.
So I ran a 5K. I go, I could do better than that. Right. So then I started training for the half marathons.
Oh, nice.
And I did 3 St. Jude half marathons, and then I did one in Las Vegas, and I did one in Disney. And then we started the foundation, and I said, well, let me do a 5K, right? Pretty simple. You get a track or an area to do 5K. We did ours at Markham Park,
Okay.
and we started that, and it was pretty good for a while. We had 300 runners. We paired up with some local running stores and shoe companies and stuff like that, and we had a lot of support, and we had the 5Ks, and those were good for about 4 or 5 years, 6 years even. And what then started trending is Spartan races and mud runs and zombie runs and all these kind of glow runs and stuff like
Right,
that.
right.
And people started, like, every weekend there were 15 things to do. So it's hard to compete with some of those
Right.
big corporations that are running these big runs and mud runs and all that stuff. So what happened was we kept doing them, but we noticed that the attendance was slowly going down, and that was our primary fundraiser, right? We would have one race a year, and it pretty much sustained us for the year, giving out the grants to all the families that were applying. And then you want me to go into how we
Yeah,
got to this
absolutely.
point, right? So then my wife and I do a lot of cruises. That's like our favorite vacation. We enjoy the journey, and we don't worry so much about the destinations, right? So we like we like getting on these cruises and just enjoying the food and
And
you know
disconnect a little bit,
just
right?
disconnect, have some drinks, chill out, relax, and just really get away from everything. And you don't have to worry about you know booking a hotel in this city and that
Right,
city
right.
and all that stuff, right? You make one booking, you're good to go. So we're on a short little weekender cruise out of Miami, and we're having a couple drinks, and we're at this one bar in the center of the ship, and we meet this couple, right? And we start talking, and the guy's name is Jack Bevilacqua, and we start talking, and come to find out, he lost both of his parents to cancer, mom and his dad. I don't remember the time frame, but it was pretty close. So he decided to start a foundation of his own in Tampa.
Okay.
It was called Crack Up Cancer. And after he shared his story, I shared my story about Kendra and our foundation and some of the things. He goes, what are you doing with 5Ks? He goes, we could do a Crack Up Cancer event in South Florida and give all the proceeds to Kendra's Kisses.
Wow.
I go, wow, that sounds great. So when we got back off the cruise, he invited us to his show in Tampa, and we went over there, and he pulled me up on stage, and you know, I'm not a man in front of the cameras or whatever, but so I went up there, told a little bit of the story and how we met, and I saw the event that he put on, and he goes, let's do the event in South Florida, and we did our first show down here in 2021, right after COVID.
Right after COVID.
Right after COVID, and we met before that, but COVID shut everything down. We
Right.
actually had planned the event, and we had to cancel it because of COVID. Um, so we had our first one in 2021, same place, Savor Theater in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and it was a hit. You know, everybody came out. The comics were great. We had a great time,
It's amazing.
great venue, and that's how we met, and that's how we transitioned from the 5K fundraisers to the comedy
To
show
the comedy
fundraiser.
show, which we got one coming up,
Yes.
right? Which we want everybody to know about this.
Mhm.
When is it? That's coming up.
So March 21st, which actually happens to be, it would be Kendra's 23rd birthday.
Oh, right.
Right,
You did
so
mention that earlier.
So it's on her birthday. So we're having a little something special this year. You know, my wife's going to make some cake pops and a birthday cake and stuff like that. And
Nice.
we're going to have, you know, a little kind of birthday theme celebration, right? But it's March 21st. It's at the Savor Theater, downtown Fort Lauderdale. It's called Crack Up Cancer, and 100% of the proceeds go to Kendra's Kisses. We have 4 headliner comics. They're all amazing.
Where do you find these comics?
So Derek Richards is one of the comics. He's a national comic. He used to be out of Las Vegas. I think he's out of Detroit now. And so I met him through Jack in Tampa at
Okay.
one of the shows over there. And he has a history of cancer also. He
Mm.
battled cancer himself. He has a book that talks about it. And when we met him and I started to talk about our story, we just connected, you know, and we became friends. And you know, we've done more outside of the comedy shows. You know, we talk and all this stuff. So this year, he was at our first show, and this is our third show. So I asked him, because he's in the industry, can you book the other comics for us? And he handpicked the other 3 comics. Derek Richards is our headliner, and then he was able to line up Nathan Wallace, Lisa Correo, and Carl Remy. So it's an all-star cast that we're going to have at our comedy show. It's going to be a great time. And so March 21st, Savor Theater, downtown Fort Lauderdale. And I'm sure you're going to have a link for the tickets.
Oh yeah. We're going to include all the links and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be exciting. We're going to bring a pretty good sized crew from the Liquid Vita team, to
Mhm.
support. We'll get some content out there as well too to really spread the word. Now, the foundation, Kendra's Kisses Foundation. I want to talk about the impact that it's had. You're talking about it's been able to actually donate quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since our inception, which was pretty much the end of 2007, I think we were founded, we've given grants to families in the amount of over $100,000. So
Amazing, man.
yeah.
Amazing.
So
And something like that makes a huge difference,
Yeah.
for families that are struggling. Chief Vermont, man, right now there's a big movement happening called Make America Healthy
yep, I heard of it.
Again.
It's great.
And I'm a part of it, man. So, I always like to bring stuff up on the podcast about it. And related to what you've gone through and the foundation that you have, what is something that people, often overlook when families are facing these type of illnesses?
Mhm.
When we start talking about Make America Healthy Again, healthy is not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy. Based off of what you've gone through, what is something that you can leave the listeners with when it comes to that?
So it's really, you talk about the name of your podcast is A Healthy Point of View, right? And you really have to make decisions. Not that it would have changed anything that happened to Kendra, but there are a lot of cancers that you can change the outcome. And if you're, I mentioned it earlier, if you have a car, you want to put cheap oil and cheap gas in there, or do you want to take care of it? And what you put in is what you get out of a vehicle. And
Right.
really, it's the same thing with your body. What you put in your body is what you're going to get out of it. And if you feed it good, healthy stuff and you make good decisions, you're going to feel better. You're going to have less aches and pains. You're going to be clearer mind. And it really just changes out your whole outlook and everything. You're going to be more pleasant. People are going to like you.
Yeah.
So it's really it's more than just what you're eating. It really is a whole mindset. And it affects every part of your life. It makes you more positive. And I always, I said my life had chapters, right? And before I got married and before kids were born, we see a lot of stuff in the business, right?
Right.
You see shootings and stabbings and kids getting run over by cars and all kinds of stuff. And you start to get a little pessimistic, and have a negative outlook on life. And you might make some bad decisions, where you have a bad day at work and you go home and you hit the bottle and, you just start drinking or it can really affect your mind. And everything kind of ties into that, the
Right.
way you process things, what you're eating, what you're drinking, and the whole scope of it. So I was able to. I like to say that my eyes kind of got opened after the diagnosis, and you start to realize that hey, you only have one life, you only have one chance on this earth, and you want to make it last as long as possible,
Absolutely.
and you want to be as healthy as possible so you can do the things. So I can be there for my grandkids, and which I don't have any yet, but I'm sure in the future, near future, I may. But yeah, you don't want to have a sickly exit.
Right.
You want to, when they an old saying I used to have, live like James Bond and die like James Dean. And
Yeah.
I'm sure if you research those, you'll understand it a little bit more, that quote. But yeah, you want to be here as long as possible. We only get it's one take.
Absolutely.
You know.
So for the viewers and listeners, man, when it comes to the Kendra's Kisses Foundation,
Mhm.
where do you want to see this in the near future? What type of further impact do you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could take it to the next level. Um, I would probably at some point because, I only have a few years left in the fire service. I'm going to be retiring. My goal is to retire by the time I'm 59. And one of my goals is to do exactly that: live life, travel the world.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
go everywhere, wherever I can. I got a map in my bedroom with push pins on
Nice.
places I want to be, places I've been. Two different color pins. And that's one of my goals. I want to go to Australia. I want to go to Indonesia and all kinds of just see the world
Right.
and how it is. And so I'm not sure that I want to keep the foundation. I'll always have the foundation, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be in control of it. I
Right.
may have a company come in and take that so that Kendra's name lives on, and we continue to do a good mission of helping families and stuff like that. So I would like to see that happen.
Absolutely.
Still have it go. Take what we've built and maybe not necessarily expand it, but continue it.
Right.
Right. And maybe have somebody run the organization for us. Because right now it's really just my wife and me, and we have a board, but it's all family.
Right. Right.
And it can be tough. It's a big process to put on one of these shows.
Yeah.
You
I mean, you got like 200 or something people, right?
200. The theater holds 220 people. Our VIP tickets are almost sold out. I think there's 2 tickets left for VIP. But we have quite a few general admission left. We got about 65 general admission tickets
Nice.
left. So, and it's only it's less than 2 weeks away. So
Get your tickets, man.
get
Get
your
your
tickets
tickets.
now.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So we have these cards here. This is one of my favorite podcasters, The Diary of a CEO. So we're gonna have a little fun here really quick
Yeah.
before we wrap up. So you're gonna go ahead and open that up, and then you're gonna pull out a random card. You're gonna read it, and you're gonna answer it. I have no clue what's gonna pop up on that
All
card,
right. We'll see if I need my glasses to read this or not. how do you take care of you? Yeah. So that's actually an easy one. I have a work life balance that I kind of subscribe to, right? When I'm at work, I give 100%. When I'm at home, I give my family 100%. And part of that is an understanding that I can take care of myself as well. Um, I play ice hockey. That's my hobby. So once a week, I'm on the ice.
Still?
Still, yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
I know it may not look like it, but yeah. So I play in a men's league, beer league, and we have a great time. The
Nice.
camaraderie is great. It's a release. My wife will tell me that, hey, you're starting to get angry. You got to go play hockey, so get some of that energy out of you. I try to get to the gym as much as possible, and my wife does the same. When she's not working, she's taking care of herself. She's going to the gym. She's active and staying busy. And we do stuff with the kids. We do stuff as a family, and throughout the year we take a lot of vacations. Um, so there's two things: there's family trips and there's vacations. We vacation without the kids, and then we have family trips together.
That's what the kids.
That's with the kids, and you know, uh, for a relationship, I think being married 29 years coming up in April, uh, there's three things that you got to be on the same page with. One of them is money. One of them is your sexual relationship with your wife, and the third one is how the kids are. You need to be on the same page with the kids,
Mm,
because if you're not, then there's tension between you and your wife.
right.
And one of the things we always say is we were friends before we were husband and wife,
Right.
and we maintain that even to this day.
That's amazing.
And I treat everybody in my family, not just my wife, but I treat everybody with respect,
Yeah.
and I expect the same from
Right.
me, right?
Right.
So I still open the door for my wife. I still treat her like she's my queen, every day. I make her breakfast in bed on the weekends,
Nice.
and you have to feed that relationship. So that's how I take care of you, all those aspects.
That was a good response to that question, man.
Yeah,
That's
thank
a
you.
really good. I love it. I love it. I love it. So Chief, man, if there's someone listening or viewing this podcast who
Mhm,
really resonates with today's message,
mhm.
what is that one thing you can leave them off with?
I would say this: take care of you. If you take care of you, everything else will fall into place. You know,
Regardless what you have to go through, take
A- a-
care of you.
yeah, and that resiliency, right? Whatever comes, um, I learned this is that you can only control yourself. You can't control what's happening to you, but you can control how you react to it. And that's resiliency. If driving here today, if you're sitting in traffic and somebody cuts you off, you're like, oh, you're honking a horn and you're yelling at them and stuff like that. That's not changing that guy's life, but you're letting it change yours by how you're reacting.
Right.
So if you just kind of bring it in, say, well, that guy's a jerk. I'm going to carry on. It's not affecting me like that. I refuse to let negativity into my life like that. And you make a conscious decision to keep your mind straight.
Absolutely. And Chief, as we wrap it up here, if people want to find you and
Mhm.
the foundation, where can
Yeah.
they find it?
So our organization's website is called kendraskisses.org. Um, so that everything's on there. There's also a link to the show under events. You can purchase tickets on there. If you want to make a donation, if you want to volunteer for something, just reach out to me on that. My email is on there. It's also kendraskisses@bellsouth.net. So that's a good way to get a hold of me. And if there's anything we can do, there's also links on our website for other resources. I spoke about clinicaltrials.org. That's on there. There's other foundations, other health and wellness links on our website as
Amazing.
well. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Chief, man, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you for
This
having
was
me.
a message that I think a lot of people need to hear,
Mhm.
feel it. And thank you, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Amazing. Guys, you heard Chief Marc Vermont here. Life can change at a blink of an eye, but it's all about how you handle it, how you take care of yourself, how you take what the universe has thrown to you and create further impact. And that's exactly what him and his wife have done. Guys, make sure you follow, subscribe, like, comment, share. Do all that stuff here. Get this message out there. And if you're local here in Fort Lauderdale, come into the comedy show. Guys, we'll see you for the next one.